hours of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador. This is From the South, and I'm Sweeney Gray. Colombia's Revolutionary Alternative Forces of the Commons have announced a temporary suspension of the presidential campaign of FARC leader Rodrigo Timonchenko Londoño following successive attacks on the demobilized group.
For the moment, we have decided to suspend campaign activities until we have sufficient guarantees. We call on all parties and political movements, without exception, to make a statement rejecting this type of provocations. And we invite all to meet us at a forum to agree to a game of clean rules.
FARC members have been receiving threats with photos of their homes and online posts inciting violence against the demobilized group. And leaders say the length of the suspension is unknown.
A country that claims to be democratic has to give all the parties guarantees, because the basic rule of democracy is equality, and we have to act in equal conditions. This time we are not saying that the aggressions come from within the institutions. This time the aggressions and the provocations come from very well-known sectors of the Colombian far right.
Representatives of Colombia's largest remaining guerrilla organization, the National Liberation Army, have met with social movements in Ecuador. Here's more from our correspondent in Bogota, Jose Jimenez.
Social organizations traveled today, headed for the city of Quito, to meet with the ELN delegation. They are working to find a solution to the suspension of negotiations between the national government and the guerrilla organization.
The ELN tweeted photos of the roundtable held in Quito, where leaders including Chief Negotiator Pablo Beltran listened to proposals and initiatives for building peace. The Venezuelan government has strongly rejected a communique from the U.S. State Department. It said it was yet another case of interference in Venezuela's domestic affairs and a clear violation of international law. The government also rejected the decision by the International Criminal Court to investigate the Venezuelan government over protest violence last year. It said it was more than willing to go to The Hague to explain what really happened. The United States Republican Senator for Florida, Marco Rubio, has said that the world would be open to a military revolt against the government in Venezuela. Rubio tweeted the world would support the armed forces in Venezuela if they decide to protect the people and restore democracy by removing a dictator. Rubio also tweeted a section of the American Declaration of Independence, which calls for the removal of a government if it becomes destructive. The Secretary General of the Organization of American States, Luis Almagro, visited Peru ahead of a Lima group meeting next Tuesday, which will discuss measures against Venezuela. Almagro met with President Pedro Pablo Kuczynski and other officials to discuss the upcoming Summit of the Americas to be held in Peru in April. Peru has said that a Venezuelan election in April would not allow a free, fair, transparent and democratic process. Venezuelan Foreign Minister Jorge Arias says he is pleased with the talks he's had with Haitian President Jovenel Moïse. Arias said Haiti has always been a brother to Venezuela, and the tour is to strengthen the bonds of solidarity against attacks by the U.S. and its allies against both countries. He said the Latin American tour of Secretary of State of the United States, Rex Tillerson, seems to be a strategy of President Donald Trump to create a Pinochet-type dictator in Venezuela. However, Arias says Trump doesn't understand the times have changed. Venezuela and Haiti have a lot in common when it comes to aggression from the United States. Freddie Gillingham tells us more about that now.
So Venezuela's Foreign Minister Jorge Arias touched down in Port-au-Prince earlier today, where he met with Haitian President Jovenel Moïse. This is a part of a special regional tour to the Caribbean, which runs directly parallel to US Secretary of State Rex Tillerson's anti-Venezuela solidarity tour. Arriaza is seeking to boost bilateral ties, but he's also seeking to inform the various Caribbean nations of the US-imposed aggression that Venezuela now faces. Haiti is no stranger to imperialistic aggression, particularly from the United States. Haiti was the victim of a fairly vulgar offensive rant by the US president earlier in the year, which, according to the Haitian president, did damage his tourism industry. The Haitian president, Jovenel Moïse, did visit Caracas in November of last year. The aim of Arriaza's visit will be, of course, to continue a fairly fruitful relationship between those two nations. That's all we have time for now. Back to you in the studio.
Thank you, Freddie, for that report. It's been 11 months since the tragedy at the Virgen de la Asunción Children's Home in Guatemala. 41 girls died in the fire. Campaigners say the government has neglected the survivors. And now, one of the girls whose testimony helped the investigation has gone missing. Our correspondent in Guatemala has all the details.
The Guatemalan Women's Union has announced that one of the 15 surviving girls from the Virgen de la Asunción tragedy has not been seen since January 18th. Stephanie Soto Hernandez disappeared near her home, where she had returned after recovering from her burns.
The missing girl was part of a group who met Nobel Prize winners when they visited Guatemala last year. She shared her story with them, and now she's missing.
Activist Ada Valenzuela says the government's indifference has added to the tragedy, given that the missing girl's testimony had helped the investigations into the failings of the children's home.
We don't have all the information, but we are waiting for an answer from the government. As an organization, we believe that the government is responsible for what happened to this girl. She is a witness in a high-profile case. She should have been under protection.
11 months after the tragedy, which showed just how vulnerable these safe homes for at-risk children and teenagers are, there have been no radical changes to the system.
Unfortunately, not even an event as severe as this, which caught the world's attention, was able to create real change. Things have stayed the same. There has been no effort to improve things.
Stephanie Soto Hernandez's case has been handed over to Alba Kenneth, the Attorney General's missing children database. Until today, no government official has made any comment on the case.
Argentinian President Mauricio Macri's two brothers have been accused of corruption and money laundering. The Prosecutor General, Federico Delgado, presented legal evidence to accuse President Macri's siblings of money laundering and corruption linked to different corporations set up in Panama and Uruguay. We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting on. Welcome back. We go to Peru, where people marched against sexual violence on Thursday after the recent rape and murder of an 11-year-old girl, Jimena Renace. Peruvians took to the streets in what has been called a march for justice, security and peace for our children, to ask for stricter penalties for those found guilty of sexual assault. Jimena Renace was abducted outside of her school and her burnt remains were found the next day.
We are motivated by this march, by the girl Jimena, who was kidnapped by someone mentally ill and taken to a place where she was raped by 3 men. Imagine where we are going in 2018.
In Chile, families of detained persons who have disappeared or been executed for political motives can be found throughout the country. This next report takes us to the north of Chile, where families of victims are searching for justice.
Northern Chile's desert zone is marked by a recent history where it was the site of brutal crimes against humanity committed during the military dictatorship, a history retold now by the family of the victims who are awaiting of justice.
We hope that these sentences are ratified in the Supreme Court. They practically have no set deadlines. This also becomes an issue of human rights because now, 44 years following the coup, the victims are dying and so are the perpetrators, many of them without spending a single day in jail.
One of the largest torture and extermination centers in the country is in the region of Tarapacá. It is the Pisagua concentration center. It's an outdoor jail without an exit between its closure and the sea.
Se deja a un pueblo cautivo con los pescadores en ese lugar donde hay un campo de concentración.
There once was a concentration camp there, a copy of what it was in Germany.
On June 2, 1990, it was discovered with the remains of the political prisoners of Pisagua, living testimony of what they suffered before being executed.
They had the bullets on their foreheads, their feet and hands were tied up in barbed wire, and their bodies had all the signs of torture prior to them being assassinated. These are the only skeletons we have found intact throughout Chile.
Finding this adds to an already painful journey for family members of the victims in the far north of Chile, a journey that continues.
Those who disappeared included children and pregnant women. Why did they have to abduct parents, professionals, non-professionals, human beings? We still do not have an answer for that. To forget would mean that the right-wing government has won.
In a country which is beginning to lose the memory of the grave crimes of dictatorship, these groups work to remind Chileans of the debts yet to be paid.
Our struggle has been peaceful, absolutely peaceful. We only fight for justice.
The struggle will continue as long as real state policies that guarantee truth and justice remain non-existent.
3 people have died and 6 are missing as flooding continues to devastate parts of Bolivia. The victims range in age from 12 to 77 years old. In the last 48 hours alone, 50 more homes have been reportedly destroyed in the central department of Cochabamba. According to official figures, at least 50,000 families have been left homeless since the beginning of the rainy season. A state of emergency was declared in 20 municipalities and 14 others were declared disaster zones.
There are several towns that are in areas declared as disaster zones. However, what worries us is southern Tarija, in the Beni department, in which it's foreseeable there will be a heavy flow of water. However, the recommendation is for all the families that live close to the river, and an emergency has already been declared for one town. The families there ought to the maximum care and, if possible, begin plans to evacuate.
Esas familias deberían tener un máximo cuidado.
Mexican indigenous towns are at risk from the construction of mega projects, such as the country's new largest airport in Texcoco. The airport, which cost $13 billion, is scheduled to be completed in 2020 and service 68 million passengers annually. After speaking with the residents of towns affected by the construction works, the United Nations representatives said the situation is of deep concern. And the government of Nicaragua is looking to renew its Human Development Program for the next 3 years. The initiative has already had some success, as our correspondent Jose Diaz tells us.
Over the past 2 terms, the government of Nicaragua has developed a national plan for human development. The goal is to develop the country economically and socially. The 19-point plan ranges from educational policies to trade agreements.
También están todas las políticas agropecuarias.
There are also agricultural policies, policies for improving productivity, for trade issues, food quality, safety, national security, and gender equity policies. This country has already been condemned for its high rate of women participating in decision-making.
The programs aim to strengthen partnerships with the private sector, nurturing relations on the international level, at the same time ensuring needs are met on a social level.
There are more enrollments in education, more medical assistance, and new hospitals. A new hospital has just been built at a cost of $90 million, which is the best public hospital in Central America today. We now have clinics in all neighborhoods of Managua, and even in the countryside.
So far, the development plan is striking the right note and meeting the needs of Nicaraguan families. Alberto is one person who has benefited from the implementation of new policies.
I have benefited thanks to God and thanks to the government. Everything has been marching forward in progress. We have got ahead because of this.
The Human Development Plan is now in progress, and results will be evaluated across government departments.
In Brazil, more than 17,000 police officers have been deployed around Rio de Janeiro to enforce security during Carnival. Government authorities have said these measures will help prevent gang violence during the famed event. Last year, the security operation was backed by 9,000 soldiers. Carnival starts today and ends on February 13th. And a unique carnival blocker called the Thief of Hearts took over one of the squares in Rio de Janeiro. They're supporting the former Brazilian president, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva's bid to run for president. Our correspondent in Rio de Janeiro, Andrew Vieira, has more.
It's already Carnival in Rio, a party that brings the country to a halt. The famous Carnival blocos parade through the streets, but they also creatively denounce the political situation in Brazil. The Thief of Hearts bloco occupied a plaza to demand the constitutional right of Lula da Silva to be a candidate in the next elections and to denounce the lack of evidence in the former president's conviction.
We can't accept that the popular will is replaced by the will of 6 fascist judges.
Guilherme and Gabriel worked hard on their couple's costume. He's dressed up as Dictator Temer, and she's a political prisoner detained for her beliefs.
It's a rejection to the judicial system that goes against the policies of the democratic advances that we had during the past governments of the Workers' Party.
I came out in this carnival with this costume because, unfortunately, Temer is still in the presidency as a dictator.
Marta da Silva will take advantage of the carnival season to earn extra income. In a country where more than 12 million people are unemployed, this informal worker also has her opinion on the political situation.
Lula's presidency was good, both of his terms. Lula helps students, children, the Bolsa Familia program, and I think it should be the people who decide if they want him as president or not.
Lula's defense takes place in the courtrooms but also on the streets. That's why the people use their largest parties to announce to the world that an election without Lula is a fraud.
We take a short break now. Join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting on. Welcome back. Now let's take a look at some of the news making headlines around the world.
United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres met briefly with North Korea's ceremonial leader Kim Jong-nam while attending the opening ceremony of the Winter Olympics in South Korea.
The North Korean delegation. He did have a brief exchange with President Kim, in which he once more reiterated, as he has done several times to you as well, his expectation and hope that all parties will use dialogue to achieve the peaceful denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula.
U.S. Vice President Mike Pence also made a brief appearance at the reception, marking the start of the Winter Olympics. After meetings with South Korean President Moon Jae-in and Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, Pence said there should be no consideration of using the Games as an opening for substantive talks with the North, unless its nuclear program is put on the negotiating table. President Vladimir Putin has told Russian business leaders that he believes Western countries will tire of their sanctions against his government. Putin condemned the U.S. move as an unfriendly act that would complicate the already grave state of U.S.-Russia relations.
It is obvious that the sanctions will likely continue for the foreseeable future. But I repeat, I hope that common sense will prevail and that we will move forward with all of our partners in the interests of the world's economy.
2 people were killed and 55 wounded in a twin bombing inside a mosque in the eastern Libyan city of Benghazi on Friday. The explosions hit the mosque at the start of weekly prayers. The devices appear to have been detonated remotely. There was no immediate claim of responsibility for the attacks.
The leader of Hamas, Ismail Haniyeh, has left the Gaza Strip for talks in neighboring Egypt. Ahead of his trip, Haniyeh called on Palestinians to take to the streets and protest against the U.S. recognition of Jerusalem as the capital of Israel.
Since the day that Donald Trump decided to move the U.S. embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem and also recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, and Palestinians have been calling upon each other to take the streets and set and protests and rallies against this decision to show that Jerusalem belongs to Palestinians. Yesterday, Ismail Haniyeh, a leader in Hamas, have asked the Palestinian people to go out and participate in the protests today, Friday, calling it the Day of Rage or the Friday of Rage. Also, youth groups on social media have asked people to head to the border between Gaza and Israel to clash face-to-face with the Israeli forces. Right now, I am standing in an area called Nah al-Oz, which is 300 meters away from the border fence between Gaza and Israel, and as you can see behind me, the people started coming. The prayer just finished minutes ago, and the people started coming to this area in order to protest and to clash with the Israeli forces. We witnessed the Israeli forces firing tear gas and also rubber bullets. The hospitals here in Gaza have declared an emergency status as they are expecting that today many casualties will arrive to the hospitals in the next few hours.
We thank Noah for that report. The European Union's Brexit negotiator, Michel Barnier, has warned Britain that the transition period agreed on should not be taken for granted. He said if the disagreements between the UK and the EU are not resolved, the 21 months transition period may not apply. He also added that he has a problem understanding the UK's position and demands.
The United Kingdom has to accept all the rules and the obligations until the end of transition. That's only logical. It also has to accept the ineluctable consequences of its decision to leave the European Union, to leave its institutions and its policies.
Criticizing Michel Barnier's comment, the UK's Brexit Secretary David Davis said it wasn't wise to talk like that.
And I do not think it was in good faith to publish a document with frankly discourteous language and actually implying that they could arbitrarily terminate, in effect, the implementation period.
A bloom of bioluminescent phytoplankton has appeared off California's central coast. The spectacular light show was captured by photographer George Krieger. His photos show the waves lit up by thousands of tiny microscopic plants near the coastal town of Big Sur, giving the Pacific Ocean a neon glow. And we've come to the end of this news brief. For these and many other stories, you can find them on our website and telesurtv.net/English. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Sonia Gray. Thank you so much for watching.